we celebrated independence. Now I'm back here, see. So I swung my searchlight back. When you go to sleep, you turn the searchlight out. When you wake up, it turns on again. The nether hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, the nether hemisphere is the subconscious mind. And it gets pretty darn mammalian. And there's a pretty sewer-like seepage that comes up from the bottom. Or do you remember your dream? The upper hemisphere, I think, is leading into the superconscious mind. The papers suggest if we postulate a subconscious, we might be consistent postulate a superconscious. The two together constituting the unconscious part of mind. I think as you go down towards the mammalian level of mind, and the lower adjectives are down there, in the upper hemisphere, I think you're moving towards spirit. I think the soul lives in the polar region of this hemisphere. And the adjuster is tangent to the North Pole. Now, this is a very crude symbol, but I find it a very satisfactory symbol of mine. And just as much sewage wells up from the bottom, much truth seeps down from topside. There's a continuous seepage both ways into the zone of consciousness, which is the internal equator, the torrid zone. This is the picture I have in mind. It's very crude, but very satisfying. Boy, it's terrific.
Very good.
Yes, ma'am. Does it have to do with worms?
No. You say that the spirit, spiritual part of our lives, goes with your gesture.
Yes.
The decision and character goes with the soul. In the meantime, we have thoughts that are wrong, evil, ugly, but nothing is ever done about them. They're in our thoughts, even momentarily. What happens?
I think the ugliness is this soul. Let's add another category. Inconsequential thoughts. For example, all the motor memory I have was dressing, which enables me to get dressed without thinking much about it. Now, this I don't think is this. How to drive a car. Very valuable set of reflexes we develop. But strictly God, I think much of the trivia of life will pass away with the death of the cortex. I think everything of importance, I think, exists in the soul. Everything of spiritual significance is duplicated in the adjuster. Now, let's reunite all this unnatural. Whatever the adjuster has counterparted becomes active memory immediately to you. But that's only a part of what's in the soul. The remainder has to be awakened through your being told about it. By your guardian therapist, by a fellow survivor, in lots of ways. So that finally, all of the non-adjuster counterparted memory in the soul is activated and becomes active memory. And once activated, you never lose it. Consider a spirit who is assessed. He has no adjuster return. All of his memory is dormant. When he wakes up on the first mentioned world, as far as he can tell, he is a brand new being. He has no active memory of his previous state. But little by little, he recaptures his memory. And little by little, he resurrects his memory of who he was and where he came from. We part by what message?
Does he remember the bad part?
I'm sure he does. I'm sure. If there's any spiritual good to be gained from memory, remembering the bad, certainly. Certainly. I don't think any of us remember the truth. Like how to tie a shoelace. Yeah. Also warp. Yeah, sure. We're me. No good and bad.
That reminds me of something else. If you have these two thoughts and unaware that they are, and you immediately repent of them and saying that it was that's the evil side, are they like that immediately there, and they go on citing either to another?
Well, if they come back, then you just really eradicate.
So I didn't do that.
Anyway, I don't know. You see, there's a lot of what we call sinful or elusive sin. You know, good way of putting it.
Yeah.
You're not helping.
No. But
Well, that's what I meant. If you do that, if you ask for forgiveness, then is it forgiven then?
well, remember this, your feelings of guilt are not necessarily conviction of sin. You can transgress human custom and feel guilty. And that doesn't mean that you've sinned at all. It merely means you've gone contrary to the mores of your time and place.
It really wasn't.
Anyway, I don't think people sin very much. Not as much as they think they do. The papers tell us that sin must be redefined as conscious disloyalty to deity. I think mostly when we think we sin, we've been slothful. We've been animalistic. This is evil, yes. But I don't think sin.
God that, say, for instance, for example, about somebody else that did not reflect love, that is real, really just so-and-so.
For such and such.
Yeah.
And a first class such and such.
Are you talking?
They're evolving, sir. Are you talking about Democrats or Republicans? I'm a Whig, sir. No, that's not a sin. That's just damn foolish. Yeah, that describes it. That's just damn foolish.
Anybody else who's saying
Yeah. The that's a sign of immaturity.
That God would not like us to have thought that we immediately will not is not Christ.
Right.
And then you say, I'm sorry I thought that way. I thought that.
But you still get them.
Yeah.
Well, it means that you haven't grown.
Is that really? That's not.
That's not sinful. No, it's evil. Anything that's less than beautiful is evil. Ugliness is evil, but not sinful. Letting God down deliberately. I think this. I think if a mature person were hurt to a less mature being, especially, I think, to a defenseless person. This, to me, is pretty bad.
Well, Jesus admonishes us to love one another, but he doesn't command it.
No?
He advises us.
Mm-hmm.
But if we
When
don't,
my kids were
no
growing
sense.
up, they said, "Does God love Hitler?" I said, "Certainly. Certainly he does, just as much as anyone else on earth." But I said, "I think God would be very understanding if you didn't. I don't think he requires that you love Adolf Hitler. I think he'd understand if you fell a little short of having affection for him. But rest assured, he loves him just as much as anyone else. He's no respecter of persons. He may be very disappointed in you. But it has to be that way."
He loves the sinner, but he hates the saint.
He has no personal feeling for it. The law of God takes cognizance of the sin. The paper goes through that same rhetoric. It says what you said, and I'm saying.
There's a personal thing. He did a personal thing.
I think this, I can only speak for myself with any assurance. I'm not too worried about being mammalian. I'm not a bit proud of my mammalian traits, but they don't trouble me too much. If I thoughtlessly say, "Well, that's so-and-so," I don't repent it. I'm not proud of it, and I sort of push it to one side and say, "Well, I don't have to talk that way." But I don't pray for forgiveness, because I think that's a very typical, immature thought coming from an immature person, namely me. And I just don't let my imperfect estate bug me. I temper it with humor, and I'm much more concerned, Minnie May, with trying to be consciously constructive in life. And I'll let these other little things take care of themselves. I don't recall ever asking for forgiveness for a bad thought. I'll just try and offset it with some good action.
I'm sure if you ever found that you hated someone just so
I guess
you would ask for forgiveness.
Yes, I do a little praying then
Yes.
to grow up and get over it.
Saying is different than having to
Yeah.
eating you up.
In order.
I don't think I hate anyone. I'm not conscious of it. That's what shocked me, yes. I'd be very shocked to discover I hated a person. I know some people that I don't particularly want to associate with. I just assume not. I don't care to have dealings with them. I don't love those people. I'm sorry I don't, but I don't hate them, no. No, I want no contact. I would consciously go out of my way to avoid them. But I don't particularly dislike them.
Well, when you think that hate was created by a sick mind, really?
Well,
to the point. No,
it's an animal.
Good point.
I mean, to the point, so where that, like you say, it dwells within inside you.
It eats you.
I
It bugs you.
think it's
Mental cancer.
very emotional.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it,
Unstable.
Clyde. Yeah, mental cancer is not a bad way of describing it.
It will erode the rest of it.
I think envy and jealousy are akin to hate.
And there are very few people that do not have it.
Well, I think a touch of it, a slight trace of it isn't bad, but
Oh, well,
I think,
I don't.
I don't agree.
I said very few people that do not have it.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a part of our growth to overcome those.
well, but the point is that everybody is envious of something at one time.
I think a
like the
certain...
nation was envious of John Glenn. Each one thought, I would have liked to have been there. But not to the point where it dwelled on their mind
No.
and then they and when they would do something erratical.
If you have touches and twinges, these could be good, you know. A little touch of envy might stimulate you to do better. Now, if you build your life around envy
Yeah.
and hatred and jealousy, that's pernicious. But little touches of these things now and then, I could think less of that.
Well, we need it, really, because then we know what to overlook. We know what to not let.
Yes,
Yeah, everybody
exactly.
has it at one time or other, but it's still going there.
Here, I know I'm an imperfect human being. I know I'm blood kin to the animal world. I accept this. When I encounter vestigial animal traits, I don't let them bug me. I don't let them worry me. I'm not too concerned with purging my life of the negatives. I'm much more concerned with adding to my life the positives. Because I feel if I can get enough positives in there, they'll push the negatives out automatically. I think one of the worst ways, for example, to, let's say, cope with a here. Yeah. You have a sex drive that bugs you. Now, one of the worst things you could do would be to pray about it every night. Because that would keep it right in the front of your mind all the time. But if you could get interested in about 9 other things, you might sublimate. You'd add so much that's positive that this thing, which might possibly be pernicious in its outworking, yeah.
Well, in other words, we don't dry it out soft anyway. We just replace it.
Yeah.
Much of evil and possibly your thinking of wrongful doings and things is self-contempt held against you as a person, which is not meant to be held.
That's right.
Which is not meant to be held as contempt at all.
And someone touched on one.
Oh, that's a beautiful one.
We didn't want to talk about that.
We're all going to do that.
I'm on one. Still do that.
I think so too.
Well, I would say, Clyde, there are 2 kinds of people in this room. Procrastinators and liars. Might take a vote to see which is predominant.
But there's one good thing about the liars that everybody
I couldn't say I wasn't a procrastinator and keep my face straight. Well, are you improving on it?
Well, I've been looking bad. Well, maybe they might devise a shot.
You didn't take those smart pills?
You need that.
We've had enough left.
You need our Chinese does that chapter on energy transfer.
No, I think our really deadly sins are the ones they inventory in the paper. Ease-seeking, problem avoidance, unfairness, equivocation, procrastination. These they call animal vestigial traits.
That's what Burke
Straddling.
That's running around the mulberry bush.
Yeah, straddling.
Equivocation.
It's a no and yes position.
Yeah.
That's her chief thing.
It's like one of my buddies who heads up Marshall's sales. He says he wants to hire a one-armed economist. Because he says every time you talk to an economist, he's always saying, well, on the one hand, and then he says he wants to get a guy with only one arm. Can't say on the other.
No, he can't say on the other hand. He's got to say it all on the one.
He's got to be positive. He's pro-media.
And to hear y'all laugh on those tapes and not know what you're laughing about.
Well, if a person would say that Berkeley was steeped in sin,
Yes.
someone outside of your rancher might have the wrong thoughts about it. And I can truthfully say that she is.
Steeped in sin. More apt to be steeped in steak.
She could say it about me too, but she mean in probably a different fashion.
I don't remember.
I'm an easy fixer.
What's the run of the mulberry bush? When you're answering a question for me in a minute.
Well, she didn't evade, but he didn't always give direct answers either. He did,
He did when he could.
Give direct answers. Give direct answers.
Yeah, when he could.
I do too when I can, but I don't have the ability to very often.
You know, I think this. I think if we worry less about our salvation and more about our fellow men, if we worry less about the future life and more about doing a hell of a job in this life, if we worry less about what it's like to be a frog and concentrate on doing a hell of a job as a tadpole, it's pretty practical and makes sense. I'm concerned about speculating about frogs and super frogs and transcended super frogs and post-transcended super frogs. But after all, I'm a tadpole now. And all I can do is do a good job of being a tadpole. Remember, it says, the preparation for the next world is important, but nothing can take precedence over the work of the world in which you now live. But though the work is important, the self is not. And when you feel important, you lose energy to the wear and tear of ego dignity. And elsewhere it says, the work is important, but the most important part of the work is how you do the work. Not even whether you succeed or not, but how did you play this game?
That's 555?
It's in two places. It's in the Morantia Life, and it's in the, I'll give you the two quotes.
Talking about this angel, let's see, 555.
You have to take self out of the work.
Yeah.
Well, it's ego. Your self-importance and ego.
I'm quoting from two places in the
Yeah,
book.
555.
Yes.
Ministering reserves on down.
That's right.
Terrific. Make a note of that.
Now then, I'm also quoting from another
Make a note
spot.
of that. That's terrific.
555.
Last paragraph.
Well, the last two paragraphs are awful good. Doc, that's a good thing.
Let me give you the other quote, too.
Oh, that's terrific.
Read that.
Make a note there.
Now, let me see. These are ethical sensitizers, I think. Now, quicker is the morality.
That's terrific.
And associate that with 435. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Paragraph 6. Paragraph 7. It is not so much what you learn in this first life. It is the experience of living this life that is important. Even the work of this world, paramount though it is not nearly so important as the way in which you do this work. These two statements somehow to me tie together closely.
I like that one where it says it's not so much what you comprehend, it's
What you try to-
strive to
Sure.
comprehend.
Sure.
It gives me emphasis.
Now look, Minnie Mae, let's in the immortal words of Isaiah, come now, let us reason together. I believe that my father is the boss. I don't believe my father is a softie. I'm very convinced that my father is not going to do any of my homework for me that I can do. I'm equally convinced that my father will help me at any time that I really need help, and I'm over my head. This to me is just as certain as dried apples and rainwater. Just as definite, as simple as falling objects, and perspiration when you're hot, and food for hunger, and sleep for fatigue. I think my father wants me to enjoy this family. I don't think my father wants me to go around with a long face. I don't think my father believes in sackcloth and ashes. I don't see that Jesus was a man of sorrow. I think he was a pretty happy guy most of the time. He jolly well knew what it was like to weep. But for the most part, I think life to him was a joy. Now, if that's what God is like at the human level, then I think I should have a pretty good time in this life. I don't think I should presume on my Father. I should simply trust him. I should count on his love at all places where love is important. Concerning all spiritual things, not temporal. My faith should not be childish, just childlike. I think I should try to get out of this life everything I can. And since I want to receive richly, I should try to give to this life everything I possibly can. That's quid pro quo. That's fair. As I crave, so I should give. And I want to do both at the maximum. If I wear out, fine. If I rust out, shame on me. Now, this being the case, I don't think my father is concerned with trivia. If I've got some ingrown toenails, I think I'll be his son just the same. But I think if I've got some ingrown selfishness, this is pretty bad. But I just can't get excited about details in a family relationship. Because the relationship to God is so big that if I've got a little twinge of jealousy or a little anger, I'm not much given to hatred, jealousy, or envy, but I can get mad as hell and blow my wood of court, and have on occasion. That's my vulnerable spot. And say things that are better be left unsaid, that you can't ever erase. But I think a good, healthy, spiritually ennobling, morally inspiring, spiritual, religious life is perfectly consistent with an awful lot of fun down here. I'd like, for what it's worth, I'd share with you my philosophy of life. It's spelled just like the symbols of this brotherhood in three concentric circles. My outer circle is Epicurean, not hedonistic. Hedonism takes pleasure as its supreme objective. This I do not. Epicureanism says, look, it's a good world, enjoy it. This I do. I don't think the life carriers designed evolution to produce taste buds to be frustrated. I think good food, good drink is to be enjoyed. Good company is to be enjoyed. The comforts of life are to be enjoyed. My middle circle is Stoicism. Just plain raw courage. There's an awful lot of stuff that I don't trouble God with. I think human courage is designed to cope. And I think one of the greatest Stoic statements I've ever read was on a Roman tombstone. Evidently, the burial place of an old Roman sea captain. And here's what it said. Father Neptune, may this ship come safely to port. No, may it be your will that this ship come safely to port. But be it your will, or be it not your will, I hold this rudder true. That's a great statement. Regardless of the rewards, I'll play the game. I'd like, for what it's worth, I'd share with you my philosophy of life. It's built just like the symbols of this brotherhood in three concentric circles. My outer circle is Epicurean, not hedonistic. Hedonism takes pleasure as its supreme objective. This I do not. Epicureanism says, look, it's a good world, enjoy it. This I do. I don't think the life carriers designed evolution to produce taste buds to be frustrated. I think good food, good drink is to be enjoyed. Good company is to be enjoyed. The comforts of life are to be enjoyed. My middle circle is Stoicism. Just plain raw courage. There's an awful lot of stuff that I don't trouble God with. I think human courage is designed to cope. And I think one of the greatest Stoic statements I've ever read was on a Roman tombstone. Evidently, the burial place of an old Roman sea captain. And here's what it said. Father Neptune, may this ship come safely to port. No, may it be your will that this ship come safely to port. But be it your will, or be it not your will, I hold this rudder true. That's a great statement. Regardless of the rewards, I'll play the game. And my inner circle is purely religious. To me, a triconcentric philosophy of life is a pretty workable one. You get a big kick out of living. If you get cut, you don't immediately go running to God and say, "Oh, look, it's bleeding, God. Bind it up." You do your own first aid, which I think you should do. You lick your own wounds, and you still have your Father to fall back on in dire need. But to me, that keeps things in balance. And each defense is harder to take. You can breach the outer works. They're not easy to breach, but they can be breached. And I suppose you could breach the middle works. But if they were breached, you could hold the inner bastion till hell froze over. This is a very secure citadel. And from that inner bastion, you could eventually issue forth and repair all that was outside. That inner keep is impregnable. And even the middle one is singularly hard to crack. To me, these are the three appealing philosophies of life, and I simply refuse to choose among them. I just try to work all three of them in together. I like all three of them. They all three make sense. And they become increasingly strong as you go from the outer to the inner. You see, your outer work is predicated on happiness. Your middle work is predicated on courage. Your inner keep is predicated on faith. These are not bad foundations. I can never see why you have to be an Epicurean or a Stoic or a religionist. Why not be all three? As Jesus said to Goliath, when he said, "I thought to make a trader or a merchant out of my son, and you're going to make a philosopher or a religionist out of him." And Jesus replied, he says, "Let's make all four." Then he said his ear will be responsive to four notes in the melody of life instead of only one. No, except accept human limitations. I'll be darned if I worry about them too much. Don't pick on yourself. Don't worry so much about eradicating that which is ugly, as concentrate on going to the spiritual beauty parlor and
Thank you, Paul.
getting prettied up, you know. I think a positive religion is healthier than a negative one. You don't grow by subtraction. You grow by addition. And maybe spiritually by multiplication. I have a feeling, a very dim feeling, that this book is trying to convey to us a concept of religion that is much bigger than man's concept of religion. This is not an adherence to form. This is not a doing of this or that. This is not a performance in accordance with ritual. This is not living in accordance with a given set of mores or customs. This is a different attitude toward the universe. This is a feeling that you're a cosmic citizen. You've taken out your first papers. You look up at the starry hemisphere and you say, well, that's my home. This is where I'm going to live, where I'll go to school, where I will serve, where I will teach, where I will grow. These are the many mansions in my Father's home. This is your home. Somewhere in the depths of these stars and beyond them is my Father. Someday I'll meet him. Someday we shall know each other. In fact, as we now know each other in faith, I'll actually find him. Then I'll go out and serve and grow and come back and find more. It's a way of looking at things. And I think when you look at things this way, many things don't cease to be troublesome. Many tribulations, well, they may itch a little, but they don't hurt anymore. But I think we wake up on the first mansion world with all of our unfinished business.
You think we'll still have problem avoidance and ease seeking?
God, yes, I do. And we'll be procrastinators.
But we won't have arthritis.
No, we won't have arthritis.
We'll have our what?
Won't have arthritis.
Right? We'll all have two.
I'll have my thumb.
We'll all have two thumbs.
Oh, yeah.
Third one.
Yeah, my thumb will be there.
Arthritis?
I'll get a new thumb.
First measure where we can bring a leg.
People today
You know?
I'll have a little arthritis.
are searching,
I don't think so.
many are searching for positive religion.
Sure they are.
They're getting, in the pulpit, they're getting negative in many,
Too much of it.
you know.
Occasionally you get a positive pulpit, but it's rare.
They're
Where?
getting away from it.
Where, Wilma?
Huh?
Where?
Many of the churches. You had no idea the change in the last 3 or 4 years.
Are getting away from what?
Some of the Protestants
Are getting away from what?
negative.
Negative.
I think they're more positive.
Then they used to be.
I'll say this. There's lots of people doing positive things and living their way of life that teaches right in this book that they don't know they're doing. They don't realize.
The people that caused the change in the positive pulpit, I don't think it's...
Well, the people are always ahead of government or institution or the ministry or anything. That is a minority. It may not be a majority.
And they're educators.
Bill, do you get a little, just a bare insight into getting away from the trivia of everyday habits and things when you're in a plane?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll tell you something that would be good to do. The Roman Catholics have a very fine practice. They call it a retreat. They get away from things to think. I can seldom get away for a week like they do, but I often get away for part of a day or a weekend. I get lost in strange towns sometimes.
They get away. How do you mean?
Many of the Christian churches have retreats too.
Well, here's what I do. I'm out of town for over 5 days, which requires a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I'm not in Connecticut and I'm not in Oklahoma, because I know what I do with the weekends there. Let's say it's San Francisco. No one knows I'm in town. And I spend a couple of days just thinking. Doing a little reading maybe. But I run a vacuum cleaner over my soul. I try to balance my cosmic books. And I'm away from all pressure. I can think and try and add up to see where I've been, and do I need to correct my course? Am I drifting off course, or is it all right? And I don't take my hair down and beat my chest and say mea culpa, and please forgive, because I'm just not built that way. And I do a little talking things over with God, and I may kick myself in the backsides a few times because I usually richly merit such things. And but it's a time to add up. It's a time for bookkeeping. I try to. It's taken off a balance sheet. I think this is something that's very good to do. Just to get away from everything for a day or so.
Well, that's fine for people that can concentrate. When I go to thinking, my mind begins to wander, Bill. Then I get to worrying. When I worry, I fall asleep.
Well, now, JB, I try not to drink during these weekends. I see your problem, though.
He doesn't get out of the bed yet.
I was referring to a spiritual weekend, not a spiritus weekend. I think this is a good thing to do now and then. I never plan it, but when the circumstances fit it in, yeah, I get lost for a weekend. In the days before the group got going in Darien, I lost many a weekend in New York. Some of them quite literally were lost, but some of them were on this wise. That's right. I suppose they'd enjoy it if I read in the section about evolution. You know, and this, it's the thickest one you got in here. Probably this one. In this Here Now commentary I'm trying to write, keeps growing.
That's one.
This whole thing was once 45 pages, and this one appendix is now.
95?
Well, this is 67 pages.
That's one.
This whole thing was once 45 pages, and this one appendix is now,
95?
well, this is 67 pages. This particular essay is entitled Transformative Techniques, and in it I'm trying to discuss and define creation, trinitization, eventuation, fragmentation, and evolution, among other things. And I wrote a section on evolution. I thought, well, this is just duck soup. I mean, I know what evolution is. Evolutionary techniques of growth. And I said evolution is a transformative technique that can be defined as creativity in time. It is so related to time, it's so broken down into sequence by time, that any creature who is concerned in this growth process can perceive the changes that are taking place, can partially understand them, and can personally participate in them. Evolution means that the creative plan is gradually and progressively developing through the provision for and the fostering of the slow growth of the capacities of the creatures concerned. A created being starts out with an original status that he did not earn. It was bestowed upon him by the action of a pre-existent creator. In contrast to this, an evolutionary being earns everything, even his status as an ascension candidate. To make this point very clear, let us consider three examples of creation in contrast to evolution. A, pure creation. The ancients of days are a good example of an order of being that is endowed with perfection by fiat of creation. They are described as the most perfect, most versatile, and most divinely endowed rulers in all time-space existence. And these qualities are present by virtue of the creative action of the Paradise Trinity. These qualities have not been experientially earned. B, creation plus evolution. Seraphim are created beings, and they are also evolutionary beings. Angels have nothing to do with earning their original status. They are given such status by the act of a pre-existent creator, by the action of a local universe creative spirit. When such seraphim are created, they are projected at a divinity and functional level that is considerably lower than that of the Sekanophim of the superuniverses. By personal effort and evolutionary growth, the seraphim can close this gap so that they eventually function as the coordinates of Sekanophim. C, pure evolution. Mortal creatures are completely evolutionary. They are not created. They are procreated in the inhabited worlds by mortal parents. They first earn status as faith sons. Then they earn a higher status as ascending sons, as spirit beings, as Havona pilgrims, as paradise arrivals, and finally as finaliters. Everything of survival value in an ascending mortal has evolved through the cooperation of that mortal creature with the indwelling spirit of God, the adjuster. Even the arrival of the adjuster must await the first moral decision of the human being concerned. Now, that sounds real good. But you know something, we haven't said anything, have we? We haven't explained what goes on. We merely said there's creation, there's evolution, there's a mixed process. And it took a little while to dig this, but I think you might enjoy it. The mechanics of evolution. We speak of evolution and of evolutionary growth, but just what are we talking about? Just what goes on in the evolutionary process? On the inhabited worlds, evolution starts out as a mechanical process that is developing capacity for mind ministry. With the development of human life, this growth technique becomes potentially spiritual in direction. We are informed that intellectual selfhood originates in cosmic mind just as nebulae originate in cosmic force. And on the human level, such evolution may become spiritual through cooperation between the adjuster and the personality of man. just how does man evolve in this life and in the next? We are instructed in the papers that the keys of the kingdom are sincerity plus more sincerity, and that we make progress therein by decisions plus more decisions. Elsewhere, the papers say that action is the completion of decisions. Now, what does this mean? It seems to mean that creature growth has its inception in honesty, is realized by courage, and is consummated by doing something. Of course, in all this discussion, we're assuming that the decision action is good. Bad or evil decision action would appear to lead to disintegration. Survival is determined by faith, which can convert potentials into actuals in the spiritual world. But we are not so much concerned in this particular study with survival as with the actual mechanism of finite creature evolution. Let us accordingly go back to the statement about progress in the kingdom. We apparently make progress, evolve, by those decisions that are consummated in action. What does decision action do? It must speed up the velocity of interchange between the environment and the creature in action. The papers say that life is essentially a process which takes place between the organism, selfhood, and its environment. And what is the environment of a finite creature? Viewed from the finite perspective, we actually live, move, and have our being within the Supreme. Decision action must enhance, expand the relationship, the velocity of interchange between the selfhood of a creature and the living potential of energy, mind, and spirit existent within the Supreme, and out of which man and other finite creatures are derived. Without decision action, the creature would be relatively dormant in relation to the environment. The very environment which contains the potentials, the sustenance for experiential evolutionary growth. We are informed that faith determines the qualitative survival status of the soul, but that its quantitative status depends on action. When personality makes the decision to do God's will and consummates this decision in action, then spiritual faith is joined to decision action in the enhancement of growth. Decision action must provide the adjuster with greater access to the potentials of the Supreme, upon which this indweller can draw for the substance out of which to fabricate the soul. We are told that the adjuster is the maker of the soul, and elsewhere that man is derived from the potentiality of the Supreme. But the adjuster is not the only creative component in human selfhood. Were this the case, then how would a midwayer or a seraphim evolve? They are not adjuster indwelt while serving as ministering spirits. The personality of man and of higher beings is also creative. Personality is characterized by an inherent quality, the evolution of dominance, the expansion of control over both itself and its environment. This creativity of personality must explain the evolution of finite creatures in general. This concept, however, tends to oversimplify the process. We are not merely considering an active creature in a passive environment. The environment itself is a living potential. And as the creature strives for self-expression, so does the Supreme strive in that creature for deity expression. Finite creatures grow as they ingest the potentials of the Supreme by decision, and as they digestively convert these potentials into actuals by action. This is a combined technique of choice experience. It remains true that when man gives God all that he has, then does God make that man more than he is. That's the best quick summary I've been able to think of so far of exactly what goes on in evolution. How do we grow? Where do we get the stuff out of which we build larger, broader, bigger, truer, gooder, beautifuler? To me, it starts with honesty. It goes off dead center. It starts on a foundation of honesty. Initiates movement in courage and consummates that decision in action. And then you're reaching out to the smorgasbord that the Supreme Being has set, and you're filling your plate. You're eating. And you're growing fat in the process, in a benign way. But you know, it's funny. I wrote that, and then I thought, well, gee, I call this evolutionary techniques, but I haven't said what happens. And what does happen? I think something like this must happen. At least this is all derived, almost phrase by phrase, out of the papers.
Very good.
That last statement's worth some money.
That's a direct quote.
Oh, sure. That's wonderful.
Bill, sum that up and 1 or 2 cents.
What?
Evolution.
Evolution is a proposition of going into partnership with God, of taking God into your life as He has already shown His willingness to take you into His life. It is not a sacrifice of will, it is an expansion of will. It's not so much a saying of, not my will, but yours be done, as perhaps a positive declaration. It is my will that yours be done. It's a partnership that starts in time and bears the fruits of the Spirit in this life, the greatest of which is happiness, and then goes on for all future time, which is eternity.
Bill, now give us the definition of nature.
Nature,
I think it fits right in here.
nature is a mix of God's will, man's will, and the will of everybody else that's involved, together with the outworking of natural law, producing a potpourri, a grand medley that sometimes is followed up beyond all recognition. Nature.
Helen, where did the drawing come from? Where did it started for the drawing that you had up on the blackboard there now? Well, I am sorry I didn't copy. I hope you didn't erase it.
No, I should ask Bill what he thinks about the world, if, say, the Melchizedek world. Do you think that it is in the center with the other primary worlds around it?
I always draw it that way. Whether it's that way or not, it's the easiest way to draw it symbolically.
Well, now you had Salvington in the center, and you
Yeah.
had 10 pie shapes running from it. and you had up here Melchizedek and their worlds, and then on down around. Well, I couldn't find where you got the idea it was Veronica and so forth around there.
Oh, it tells us that they were in 10 groups.
In 10 groups, but the order in which they were.
Gives you all the worlds but one.
Well, that's the way they gave them to us. Yeah, they do tell you which ones they are. But whether it goes this
All right,
way
where?
or this way, I didn't know.
Where? In the lesson every night?
No,
No,
it's
I
scattered.
don't know.
It's scattered. No, it's scattered all
Scattered all
throughout.
through.
Wanda, I believe it was in the
Oh.
week before that she named the one that
Yeah, it
Helen.
started in
I was there 2 weeks and I know.
Melchizedek's, Veronadek's, Lenonadek's, life carriers,
Well, that's according to their
Annals.
archangels,
Now there's
evening stars,
spirit fused
spirit fused, seraphim,
finality.
phonalators, and they never did tell us the 10th.
Well, then I will copy it next week.
I think your best way of symbolizing any of these clusters is put the big world in the middle, then put the primaries around it, and then put the satellites like moons around the primaries. I just think of it as the world, satellites, and moons.
They may not be in that order.
I'm sure they
It may
are.
not be a complete circle
It's
around.
a
but
conventional symbolization.
It gives us an idea.
Right. Which direction do you suppose they run in?
I haven't gone counterclockwise, but I want to try to run.
Well, I would bet on that, because we're counterclockwise space level. I think you could justify counterclockwise a little better than clockwise. We are splitting hairs now, aren't we? This has got more in it that I don't know anything about than I think most papers, because they make a lot of cryptic statements in here that are, I think, designed to expand our imagination rather than to clarify our understanding. Perhaps they're designed to unify our ignorance. What was the question you asked Helen about the 3 different forms? Where is that?
That's on page 397. There are 3 primal and essentially different life plans after the order of the 3 paradise sources and centers.
And in Nebadon, these 3 basic forms of life are segregated on 3 different types of planets. The only interpretation I can put on that is it must be 1 brain, 2 brain, 3 brain types. And if it isn't that, I haven't the foggiest notion what it means.
Well, Helen just said the other night that she wasn't sure.
Well, neither am I. But that's the only thing that is in the papers which could be related to this statement, to amplify it. We're a 2 brain type. We're a little better than just flat 2 brains because we got a medulla back here that takes some of the load off the 2 4 brains. But
Well, an objective analysis of that statement would make you feel very good.
Well, that makes you feel very bad.
Why would you think if they are of divinity equality?
They're equal.
Those 3 sources and centers would be reflected down in time and space by 1, 2, and 3 bringing 1.
Well,
Basically.
I would say this, Klein. When you stop and figure that the requirement set for each type or person is always in proportion to the potential of that person, then it's an absolutely even Steven deal. Of the 1 brain type, they ask a little less. Of the 2 brain type, a bit more. Of the 3 brain type, still more. Jesus required that the Alphaeus twins be good fishermen, but that Peter be a good shepherd and feed his sheep. In other words, of each he asked all he had.
Correct. But my question is, who's reflected in 1 brain? What attenuation do they have? Spirit? Son? Father?
Don't ask me.
Hang them on in?
Don't ask me. There are 3 deities and there are 3 brain types. And if the 2 are not related, then I have nothing to add to the statement.
I find it objectionable, and yet I have nothing to replace it.
Well, I'm stuck with that interpretation. If this isn't it, I have no interpretation. What else bothered you in this paper?
Well, of course, we didn't know what the 12.
There were originally 12 distinct and divine concepts of transmissible life. I can't derive that 12 satisfactorily. I've done a lot of thinking about numerical patterns in these papers, and the 1-3-7 pattern, 1-3-7-10 pattern I can derive. There are 12 circuits in Avona, if that's any comfort to you, including the 2 dark gravity circuits. The 12 pattern does appear in nature and in our symbolic thinking. A dozen is a convenient number to work with. You can do a few things with a dozen that you can't do with 10. You can get a third. It comes out even in a dozen. And it's an irrational number in 10. You can still have quarters and halves. But 3, 4, 6 is a lovely relationship. In our thinking, the duodecimal system competed with the decimal system. The duodecimal system would be based on a dozen and a gross instead of 10 and 100. And you notice we have special names for those. I don't have to say 12 and 124. I can say a dozen and a gross. We only have a few systems that we've ever used. We've got the decimal system, obviously. This is where it comes from, 10 fingers. We've had the duodecimal system of 12. We've had the sexagesimal system of 60. We still have that in our time. 60 seconds to the minute, 60 minutes to the hour. The hours in the day is a double duodecimal. 12 daylight hours, 12 night hours.
What did you call the 60 bill?
Sexagesimal. I hope you can spell it.
I did not get it.
360 degrees in a circle is part of the sexagesimal system.
Are you going to spell it for me?
No. S-E... I'll stab at it. S-E-X-I...
C-I-M-A-L, wouldn't it?
S-E-X-I-G-E-S-M-A-L.
Oh, there you go.
Sexagesimal.
60 and what?
It's based on 60. And a square of 6. We get it in our 360 degrees in a circle, are 60 seconds, 60 minutes. That's sexagesimal. And if you're a time study man working in a plant, you discover it's a hell of a nuisance. And what you do is you deal with an hour that's calibrated in hundredths. You don't deal with seconds. You deal with hundredths of an hour. And then you can do your addition. You know, we laugh at the English with 12 pence to the shilling, 20 shillings to the pound. But we still have this, even if you use the decimal system. We still have a lot of sexagesimal, a lot of duodecimal. How many inches in a foot? That's duodecimal. Mine falls naturally in these patterns of 10, 12, 60, 360. And that to me is significant because the mind we use is a derivation, a ministry of the same mind that planned the universe. To quote from the papers, the universe in toto was mind planned, mind is mind planned, mind made, mind administered, or something like that. I can't derive 12 as satisfactorily as I can 3, 7, and 10. But starting with 12, you can see it expand all throughout the field of life. And it is the pattern of chromosomes, or human trait determiners. The female ovum has 12 chromosomes. Or what is it, 24? Yeah. And the male ovum, the male sperm has 24 when they're stripped for action. They start out with 48 and they throw half of them away. Otherwise you'd double in every generation and pretty soon you'd have a zygote that would be as big as a person. That would be horrible. other things did you run into?
Well, of course, we didn't know what the 12 was on the psyche.
I don't know either.
The 24 basic orders.
I can't give you any help there at all. I've pondered it. It must be that there are 12 types of mind. Now let me see if there's one place we might get some light. One place. I get pay dirt. Try 567, bottom of the page. I very strongly believe that these are related statements. The discussion of creature, kinship, serials. Planets are not only organized vertically into systems, constellations, and so on, but the Universe Administration also provides for horizontal groupings according to types or even other relationships. This lateral administration of the universe pertains more particularly to the coordination of activities of a kindred nature, which have been independently fostered on different spheres. These related classes of universe creatures are periodically inspected by certain composite cores of high personalities presided over by long-experienced finaliters. These kinship factors are manifest on all levels. For kinship serials exist among non-human personalities as well as among mortal creatures, even between human and superhuman orders. Intelligent beings are vertically related in 12 great groups, there it is, of 7 major divisions each. The coordination of these uniquely related groups of living beings is probably affected by some not fully comprehended technique of the Supreme Being. Here's my understanding of a creature kinship serial. You have unexpected empathy with that being. Be that be a Morontian, a Melchizedek, or a finality. You're in the same general class, perhaps the same subdivision, perhaps a closely related subdivision. You can communicate more meaningfully with that being. This is a vertical bridge between different orders of beings. You found people in life that were intellectually kin to you. You had no trouble understanding them. They talk the way you talk. And other people are much more obscure. You keep having to say, well, now, say that in a different way, you know. This is what we're talking about. Only it exists between different types of beings as well as within a given type of being. We have that experience in our relationship with our fellow mortals. We will someday have this experience as it pertains to non-human types of creatures. I think this throws light on it. This life here is basically here's a logo.
Now, in world number 5, where life is associated with mind, single-faced creature mind correlated with creature life. Does that have anything to do with the adjectives, the different things?
Let's come again.
That's world number 5, the bottom of thing on there.
Single phase of creature mind correlated with creature life. Well, Well, as far as we know, it relates to the 7 adjutants. But I would hesitate to say that's its sole function.
This world might have something to do with
Yeah.
one particular action.
Yeah, I think that's what they intend us to get out of this.
They just explain the 7 central emplacements of the adjutant master,
Yeah.
which is on world number 1.
Let me go back to the text and be sure I remember this. I can visualize I symbolize this in my mind as kind of a barometric gauge, pressure reading if you want it. And there's maybe 7 formulas, but 25 or odd million gauges. 1 for each adjutant on each inhabited world. And on the first 5 adjutants, you can take off a reading. The adjutant is active, and how much activity is going on? Qualitative and quantitative reading. On the last 2 adjutants, you can merely take off a qualitative reading, because the quantitative experience of worship and wisdom registers directly in the consciousness of the creative spirit. She can take off the quantitative reading, but you can't get it on this world. This repercusses in here.
So then on this world, these sort of gauges that are going to
Yeah, yeah.
But,
Yeah. That's how they can tell that the adjutants are working.
and that would be for the entire planet
Apparently, yeah.
as an individual.
I would think so. I get too many gauges otherwise. This thing gets to be, we will get 3.5 million planets, 7 adjutants working on each planet, 7 times 3.5 million is a lot of gauges. Now, if you're going to take off a reading for you and me and Tom, Dick, and Harry, we haven't got a world big enough for all those gauges, even with transistors. What else did you encounter?
Julie, why is it then that of the 7 adjutant mind spirits that the Midway Treaty basically used only the last 2,
Mm-hmm.
Is it because they are not animals? They're midways.
I think of a secondary midway as a human being minus the animal part of a human being. Take any one of us and subtract the mammal, and what's left is a secondary midway. Now there's a note you ought to make to cross-reference, which is interesting. Turn to page 403, those of you who like to make cross-reference notes in your books. I'll share one I have with you. Up at the top of 403, if you care to make the note, see page 528, paragraph 4. Totalizing function of 5 adjutant minds. That's what the reference pertains to. Now we'll go over there and read it. Totalizing function of a 5 adjutant mind. A 5 adjutant mind equivalates to a 6th level. That's the way these little goodies are carried all over. The 5 five adjutant mind equivalates to a totality or sixth reality level. And it is this factor which persists as an experiential identity. They're talking about the Spornagia on the system headquarters, who could be described as near perfect mammals. They're designed for the life charges. And they experience reincarnation. When an old Spornog's body wears out, they build him another one, and they move him out and into. And this sixth value is this is how he moves. He's got a total of his five adjutant mind. Now that's not the spirit of worship, that's something entirely different. It's the total of five adjutants. Animals do have individuality. I don't think animals have nearly as much personality as we think they have. I think we read into a dog many personal qualities that are not there because we are persons, and we project them into the dog. But this does not mean that the dog does not have individuality. And that's the sixth value of five adjutant mind. That's a good cross-reference to have there, I think. More questions?
Oh. Why don't you explain what would be in the category of non-teachable mechanical mind and what would be in the category of overlapping on the first adjective?
Well, I think the word we have for the mechanical, non-teachable mind is atropism. It is the intelligent response of the vegetable kingdom to its environment. The sunflower turns its face to the sun. You have a plant in your office, it grows towards the window. And you turn it, and it starts going towards the window. Now, if you have a higher mammal, and you keep reversing its action, eventually you will frustrate that mammal and give it the heebie-jeebies. And that mammal will become neurotic, just like a person. But your plant will never become neurotic because the response is mechanical. You will go on patiently, regrowing towards the window one time or 10,000 times. Again, consider a tree threatened by erosion. We've all seen this. That tremendous engineering job a tree does with its roots, throwing him back in the bank to maintain a vertical position. That is a mechanical response. All trees will respond in substantially the same way to that threat of erosion. But it's a response. It is a minded response. It is an intelligent response, but a mechanical response. You can never teach a tree to do it any differently. Now let's take the simplest single-cell animal. We've left the vegetable kingdom, we're in the animal kingdom now. Let's take an amoeba. You put a weak electrode in the water where the amoeba is swimming around. And let's say we've got an area, like a circle. Cut it. This is a kind of a big flat droplet with an amoeba in it. Put an equator across it. The electrode's in the southern hemisphere. The amoeba eventually trickles down into the southern hemisphere. You give it a mild shock. It retreats into the northern hemisphere. Now, amoebas vary in IQ. Some take 6 shocks, some take 16. But eventually, all amoeba learn to stay out of the southern hemisphere. And that's something you can't do with a tree. The tree will keep right on going to the southern hemisphere forever. When the amoeba subdivides, the 2 primary offspring will stay out of the southern hemisphere. But when they subdivide, the 4 secondary offspring have to be taught all over again. The nucleus does not retain the learned response after the second subdivision. But these 4 new amoeba now can be taught again. That's teachable mind. And if I had to pick a transitional area, although I can give you no illustration, I would take a sponge. as something which is darn close to midway between the vegetable and the animal kingdom. But I don't know of any, I have no illustration to offer you as to the responses a sponge would make to an environmental stimulus. You can teach an amoeba, you cannot teach your plant. You see, if the plant were teachable, the plant would eventually give up trying to grow towards the sunlight and accept frustration and become neurotic and wither, and you would have to send it to a plant psychiatrist to get straightened out.
Bill, said that the plant reacts with mindedness. The lowest adjuvant we have is the adjuvant of intuition.
Correct.
What mindedness? That the plant's reaction in your illustration
Is subadjutant.
Intuition.
No, this is subadjutant.
It,
This is a different form of mind.
what
This is
type of mindedness is it?
mechanical, non-teachable. Always makes the same response, always. As long as life persists in the plant. If
What
you,
sponsors that?
the master physical controller sponsor this one. I don't know too much in this area, but I've listened to a good botanist describe the engineering work that's done in a tree to raise that sap, as in a redwood tree. That's a lot of footage that sap is raised from the ground. That's a tremendous engineering achievement. Consider the engineering facility of a green leaf, where the green leaf just casually breathes in carbon dioxide, takes sunlight, smashes that molecule, releases the oxygen, takes the hydrogen, again with sun energy, knits that hydrogen with carbon to make basic cellulose. That's quite a chemical feat. It's kind of hard to do in a laboratory. It takes a good deal of electrical power. These leaves do this casually. But they always do it the same way. You can't teach a leaf. It won't change. You can teach an amoeba.
Bill, on top of page 399 says mind, such as man, comprehends. Is an endowment of the seven action mind spirit superimposed on the non-teachable or mechanical levels of mind.
The mechanical mind was here first. Because you can't have very much animal development until you have plants to feed on.
Well, now, the thing that you've been talking about trees and plants is the mechanical level
Yes.
of mind.
Yes.
No.
Totally different. We use two big words in biology. Kingdom. The vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom. Those are our basic divisions, I believe, aren't they? And you have two basic divisions of mind operating on this planet. That which pertains to the vegetable kingdom, that which pertains to the animal kingdom. In human experience. This gives you, of course, a very beautiful retort to someone who disagrees violently with you. You just say, well, you certainly are not much above the level of mechanical, non-teachable mind. Good in political argument.
Talk about the seven adjutants a little bit. Tell how they work on the animal bodies. On all the first five and the last two. The animal bodies. On all the first five and the last two.
These adjutants are operative as a directive force in evolutionary life. they condition evolution. They are the explanation of continued purposiveness in evolution. Did you ever stop and think of the tremendous proof that evolution offers of the existence of a creator? You start with seaweed, gook, algae, green stuff that you clean out of your pool, you know? And from this, you derive more complex plants. You derive transitional organisms like sponges. You wind up on the mammalian side and still continue the evolution of plant life. From single-celled animals, you get multi-celled animals. Temporary multi-celled, as in a Volvox colony, then permanent multi-celled animals. You get animals that develop differential rates of metabolism. You know, a little warmer at one end than the other, a little more energy spent at one end. You get the beginning of a brain up at one end and the tail at the other end. You have the whole story of complex organisms being derived from simpler organisms. You know, from an economic standpoint, it's like you put some copper, that's our simplest coinage, just some raw copper ore in a barrel, start agitating it. And pretty soon you're deriving from that silver, gold, coinage, agitate it some more, bills of lading, promissory notes, common stock, preferred stock, secured, unsecured debentures, mortgages, and the whole complex financial picture that we have. That would be an economic fable illustrating the development of life on the planet. In other words, we have the complex being derived from the simple, which is like water flowing uphill. And I have news for you, water will flow uphill. And the whole story of evolution to me is totally inexplicable without you assume there's a pump somewhere pumping this life uphill. This to me is one of the great proofs of God. How does water flow uphill? And I refuse to be incredulous like the old farmer that went to the zoo and saw his first giraffe and says, "Gol darn it, there ain't no such animal." When I see water flowing uphill, I say, all right, so it flows uphill. Let's go find the pump. This is an unusual case. Water usually flows downhill. But in this case, it's flowing uphill. Where's the pump? I'll tell you a parallel illustration, this time on the theological level. Sit down, sort out your Old Testament chronologically. It's not quite the way it is in the Bible. Some of the older books are later, and some of the later books are earlier. Sort it out chronologically and study the God concept in the Old Testament. You will see exactly the same evolution. God starts out not particularly lofty. He's a tribal God. He's interested in the Jews and not much of anyone else. He's not above some sharp practices, you know? Take that all the way till you get to Deutero-Isaiah. And there you've got a God that's the Lord of the universes. And that's unique too. No other religion, maybe Buddhism, but except for Buddhism, no other religion has done this. You have concept flowing uphill from a primitive God to a tremendous God.
God, Bill, he was giving them all they could take.
Sure, sure. The unique thing,
by degrees.
yeah, the unique thing about the Jews is they had so many prophets. None of their prophets was unique. You could find others like him elsewhere, but they had a succession of them. Each one built.
Each time that there was a calamity,
Yeah.
another prophet
That's right.
was on the scene.
That's right. They had a succession. They could build. They kept momentum going. There you have exactly the same story on the ideational level, the evolution of the God concept in the Old Testament. And that, to me, is the intriguing aspect of divinity that shines into the Old Testament. Not that a lot of that balderdash is particularly true, but it grew from the primitive to the sublime. Again, concept is flowing uphill. Where's the pump? I can understand decay on a mechanical basis, but not growth. There has to be an impetus to produce growth.
Where is the pump here?
Yeah. Where's the pump? I think these adjutants explain why it goes uphill. You know, you really should read two papers together. You shouldn't read the life carriers without reading the Over Control of Evolution. You have the life carriers actively working on the physical level in conjunction with the mind adjutants to foster and keep this thing operating in a purposive sense. Now, these life carriers are not infinite in wisdom. They're awfully smart technicians. You know, an average human being has an IQ of 100, and about 140, you're getting real bright. Probably the highest human IQs are under 200. I would estimate their intelligence level at about 1,000 or more. But still, they're creatures. And I don't think they foresee all of everything that's going to happen. I wonder if I can communicate this idea. To run an elevator, you have to have a counterweight. In the evolution of an ovum, you have a casting out of part of the nucleus. I think the life carriers pretty clearly forecast the main course of evolution, but not all of the cast-outs and the corollaries, the repercussions of these gene combinations. Are you with me? I haven't said this well, and I don't know how to say it. I think they can forecast the positive combinations that they project. But I don't think they can forecast the main tent, but not the sideshows. No, I've said it. I think the dinosaurs were a sideshow. I will lay you odds. The life carriers were just as surprised at the dinosaurs as our diggers into the past are surprised, because I can think of nothing more useless than critters like that. I don't think they were any part of the life carrier design. Now, the reptilia were, and the dinosaurs were in a side tent. I think many things happen on the planet that are outside of the forecasts of the life carriers.
Probably a great many more happen and are lost. And
Sure.
Just as the dinosaurs have been.
But they forecast, I think, with very great statistical accuracy, the main line of the evolutionary ascent, but not all of that which is derived from the main line.
suppose they knew what we were going to look like when we finally came into human beings.
Yeah, I think they had a pretty good notion. They've done this so many times.
Bill, they couldn't forecast all the infinite number of combinations that
No.
take place.
The number is too big.
Yeah.
The number is too big. The number is a... well, we have no name for such a number. We'd have to write it exponentially. Sure.
Do they exercise power to bring to extinction these sideshows?
They did once. You remember they planted life in 3 places. And early in the game, the Australasian implantation lost so much germplasm of a potential nature that it wasn't going to make it. And the life carriers went in and deliberately wrecked the remainder so it wouldn't serve as an interference in the other 2 implantations. And I suspect that's why they made 3 implantations. There's a possibility that... and that's why you never got any mammals in Australia. They stopped at the marsupials. That's interesting.
My point was that what I was concerned about, geologically there were quite a few monocostals.
Sure.
And some of them have no explicitly there's no explanation for their such.
I don't think they terminated the dinosaurs. I think the big beasties starved to death. They didn't have enough brains to feed their bulk.
There are a lot of things
Yeah.
that weren't that.
Some dinosaurs are believed to have developed even a rear engine brain. You know, like when you get a hook and ladder wagon that's too long, you got to have a guy at the rear end to steer it too. And it's believed that they had a kind of a semi-cortex up there to handle the hind legs as well as the main brain to handle the forelegs.
Maybe that's what we got back here.
Yeah. But you see, with all that bulk, a dinosaur probably had a brain less than, say, 5% the size of a human brain.
One of their most beautiful things is the pecadillo.
Yeah.
The best-bedded creatures. Why should they be extinct unless they sought to?
I don't think that they always see to this. They may or may
I don't
not.
think that they did.
I think natural selection determines most of it. I don't think they interfere too much with natural selection. I think they interfere some.
They're more, such a thing, archaeology, something like that. It's more versatile than a frog. The frogs exist. Very important. They're gone.
Well, they were more specialized. The frog had more generalized functions. Here. This is not a very specialized tool, the human hand. But it is one of the greatest general purpose tools that was ever devised. It can make specialized tools. A human being is not a highly specialized mammal. We can't kill like a lion. We can't graze like a horse. But we fit in pretty much anywhere. We're general purpose mammals, not specialized mammals. A porpoise can outswim us. So can a seal. But they're in trouble on dry land, and we can swim too. Man retains the general purpose. I think we might just touch on a little embryology, which is kind of fun to think about in this connection. Can you visualize the mammalian tree? Visualize it as a tree with a broad trunk and many branches. And each of these branches represents the coming out of the tree of a species. Be it a worm, a cricket, a bee, a bird, a shark, or a frog, a marsupial, or a mammal, or the higher mammals, or man. Human beings have much in common, evolutionarily speaking, with the higher mammal. As you go down the tree, you discover that there's a part of the trunk which we have in common with the bird, with the reptile, with the amphibian, with the fish, with the prevertebrates. Do you see this? Now, a human embryo goes through all these stages of development which are in the common trunk, not in the branches. That which man and fish have in common, the embryo passes through. The little human embryo develops gills and then closes them up. And if they aren't closed, it takes a little surgery when the baby's born. A whale embryo develops articulated legs because whales are derived from one-time land creatures. And then this embryo disjoints these legs. And these disjointed bones are buried in the carcass of the whale. This bone, that bone, and these bones. They're not hooked up together anymore. They're in there loose in the whale fat. But they were once articulated at a certain stage of embryonic development. And that, to me, is one of the interesting pieces of evidence of our kinship with the whole mammalian group. We start out as a zygote, which is the fancy name for a fertilized ovum. And that's very similar to an amoeba. That's a one-celled animal.
Could this new drug that has been people have been so looking at causing these babies to arrive without limbs or without arms, I wonder if it could be a reversion of some kind.
It's upsetting the mother's system and is affecting the development. Just like in a free market in cattle. You get sieved embryonic calves in there, and let's see, one set of characteristics appears a little before the other. And what is it, the male that wrecks the female, or the female that wrecks the male in a free market?
I don't know.
But you wind up with a perfectly sterile cow that won't breed. And it's because there were twin calf embryos in there.
Twin heifers.
Twin heifers, yeah. And one of them, one of different sex. You had two eggs that got fertilized. With identical twins, it's one egg. With sib twins, it's two.